Hello YouTube, this is Dakota from Bowtied Media, and today I've got a brand new reviews roundup where I go over albums and give my little opinions and scores on albums from the month of May. Yeah, it's December 5th as we're recording this, and I'm a little behind, but let's hop into it. First up, we've got GHENGAR with Sacrifice. This EP is quite sporadic and all over the place, both quality-wise and stylistically. The tracks don't really gel well together, and there are numerous times where the production is just noise without a purpose. And I'll give this a Bowtied 4. Then we got Nytrix with Hearts on Fire. Nytrix's best production to date, hands down. I think the slew of production features really helped this EP be more than just another generic melodub project. These tracks are some of his most playful, for sure, with a flurry of synth solos and vocals that actually landed for me. I still think the lyricism is quite shallow, but that's a minor drop in the bucket for me here. And I'll give this a Bowtied 8 out of 10. Then we got Dirtyphonics with Magnetic, an LP that has some things going for it and some against, but I just ultimately found it to be a mostly derivative drum and bass project that lacked enough kind of oomph to separate itself from the other D&B records out there. And I'll give this a Bowtied 6. Then we got Dua Lipa with Radical Optimism. Dua Lipa's third studio album may lack that kind of X factor her latest record had, but makes up for it, at least part of it, with some consistent writing and production. Aside from the singles, there really isn't much to write home about here. This record is kind of as vanilla as Dua Lipa gets. And while that's a bad thing for most artists, it's not a death sentence for Dua. I'll give this a Bowtied 7. And we got Grape Milk with Sparky. This is ADHD, the album. As Grape Milk has begun to carve out their niche in the EDM space, I feel like their creativity might be overshadowed by some rough production. I still think the record has a lot of good things going for it, and at the same time, you can also hear the lack of experience. I don't doubt that Grape Milk has the capacity to kind of make it. I just don't think it's with this record. And I'll give it a Bowtied 6. Then we got INZO with Visionquest, a mixture of dense dubstep and atmospheric ambiance. Visionquest is another full kind of INZO EP. He's been playing around with a variety of tones and styles as of late, but has seemingly now landed on what he wants to do with his kind of core sound and what he wants it to be. I do believe he's at his strongest when he's focusing on creating an atmosphere above all else, but this kind of more bass-centric tracks also cook. I'll give this a Bowtied 7. Then we got Starseed with Equinox, a small collection of melodic bass tunes that have their signature Starseed sound to them. Nothing too crazy one way or another. I'll give this a Bowtied 6. Then we got TYNAN with Idiot Personified, yet another abrasive, screeching 3-track dubstep EP that stays true to TYNAN's charming production style. And I'll give this a Bowtied 6. Then we got Wavedash with Tempo. With a smattering of engaging and club-ready tunes, Wavedash has produced a collection of tracks that might just be some of their most fun summer tracks to date. As a mixtape format would imply, there really is no rhyme or reason for the tracklist ordering, nor a narrative throughline. Yet this compilation of tracks pieced together fairly well. I will say that in the first half is substantially stronger, and it is better than the back half of the project, but I still liked it holistically. And I'll give this a Bowtied 7. Then we have Hairitage with Revelry, more or less a standard dubstep EP, just with some of the fattest synths of the year. I will give this a Bowtied 6. Then we got A.G. Cook with Britpop. Whether or not we knew it at the time, this record was instrumental in paving the way for what would be a very, very brat summer. With dense electronic elements, pop-bass fusions, and an overarching feeling of pleasure, Britpop is a trilogy of unique soundscapes. And while the first section was undoubtedly the best and most consistent, each movement holds its own weight. I'll give this a Bowtied 7. Then we got Alesso with Hypnotize, a quick 3-track EP of repetitive and boring house music. The production and mixing here isn't all that bad, but it just feels like all the creativity was sucked out of this project. And I particularly have a distaste for added lyrics for the sake of merely filling a void, and that's all too prevalent here. I'll give this a Bowtied 5. And we got Iglooghost with Tidal Memory XO, a brilliantly mixed collection of deconstructed club tunes. Iglooghost is on another kind of tear with this record, and he's showing no signs in slowing down. It's glitchy, intense, and has a flair for the European tone. I'll give this a Bowtied 7. Then we got Kings of Leon, Can We Please Have Fun? There are hints and inklings of what could have been the best Kings of Leon record yet, but ironically, I think the lack of real single-type tracks hold this project back. It's a tracklist full of consistent alternative rock instrumentation and production, just didn't have that star power. I still will give it a Bowtied 7 though. Then we got more Kismet with Humor Me. More Kismet with a yet another brilliant project filled to the brim with explosive sound design and colorful production. They have really found their sound and have been diving into it fully. That being said, I've sort of hit a tipping point with this EP, whereas we've heard these melodies and tones before. I think that if more Kismet wants to have a fruitful career, it's time to switch it up kind of moving forward. Show us what else you got in the tank. I'll give it a Bowtied 7. Then we got the Chainsmokers with No Hard Feelings, the Chainsmokers' most whatever project to date, and somehow that ends up being one of their best. The production is bland, but not egregiously terrible. The lyricism isn't great, but not their worst. They've kept things very down-to-earth tonally, and I think that kind of worked well in their favor, honestly. I'll give this a Bowtied 5. Then we got UBUR with HAZARDOUS, UBUR's weakest project yet. There is an attempt at the super edgy production, but it just feels so disingenuous. And the ideas of each track don't really feel fleshed out either. I'll give this a Bowtied 4. Then we got Childish Gambino with Atavista. The final completed version of this record was seriously needed. Rather than an odd collection of incomplete tunes, Atavista is a whole, complete, and refined work of music. And I'll give this a Bowtied 8. Then we got Arm & Hammer with The Mess We Made. Arm & Hammer took another crack at heavy melodic dubstep with a quick 3-track EP, a project that falls into the same old dubstep tropes that plague the industry right now. And I'll give this a Bowtied 5. Then we got Bishu with Micro Celebrity. Bishu's debut LP perfectly encapsulates his style, tone, and production that he's been perfecting for years now. Taking a commercial approach, each of these tunes are quick hits of danceable electropop. That being said, this record is not intended to really be critically analyzed, like I'm doing now, and instead simply just enjoyed on the surface. I'll give this a Bowtied 6. Then we got Axel Boy with Power Lines, a fairly by-the-books drum and bass EP with no new creative ideas, but some good standard-sounding drum and bass. I'll give this a Bowtied 6. Then we got Billie Eilish with Hit Me Hard and Soft. Billie and Phineas's best work, personally. Both lyrically and on the production end of things, these two are in tip-top form. Billie's storytelling has always been real, but by putting things more simply this time around, she's inviting more of her audience into that narrative. And Phineas's production is familiar yet brand new territory with a stronger emphasis on creating cinematic and climactic moments over pop hits. If the last couple tracks would have been kind of had that same gusto as the first few did, this could have been the greatest pop record of the decade. But I will give this a Bowtied 8. Oh, and then we got Galantis with RX. Truly the downfall of Galantis. Gone are the days of engaging dance pop tunes that paved the way for house in the commercial sphere. If anything, Galantis has been pulled down by their peers and encouraged to produce derivative commercial slop. It takes a lot of character and integrity to push against the tides of the current state of dance pop, and I guess Galantis just took the easy route. I'll give this a Bowtied 3. Then we got Snail's House with Pixelize 2, a holistically nice-sounding EP, but that's about it. There isn't much variety or tonal deviation. That being said, the tracks still sound great and are wonderfully mixed. I'll give this a Bowtied 7. Then we got Nigel Good with A Little Something, a finale and prequel to a trilogy of grand space records. A Little Something sees the return of Nigel Good from an almost decade-long hiatus, and what a return it was. Far from the flashiest of albums, Nigel manages to piece together a beautiful soundscape of lush sound design and an adventurous atmosphere. This is some of the best melodic / kind of ambient house production you will hear this side of the 2020s. It's hard to express how truly magical this record is. But I'll give it a Bowtied 9 out of 10. Then we've got Park with Stonelands, a picturesque debut record of atmosphere and ambient house production. I think this album is a sign of good things to come. Park's production and sound design is solid. He just needs a little bit more songwriting and storytelling experience. I can see what narrative through lines he's going for. They just didn't land all of that for me. So I'll give this a Bowtied 7. Then we got Cosmo's Midnight with Stop Thinking, Start Feeling. With the complete absence of new disco in the modern landscape, Cosmo's Midnight is here to prove that the genre still kicks ass. Bright production, funky instrumentation, and fun songwriting all gives this album a sense of carefree energy while delivering some of the catchiest beats of the year. And I'll give this a Bowtied 8. Then we got Kaisa with Dancing and Crying Volume 1, a very strong dance pop showing from Kaisa with a collection of dance floor hits and narratively driven cuts. I'll give this a Bowtied 8. Then we got Marshmello with It's Rhythm Time. Marshmello can't really find his footing in any genre right now. Maybe it's time to return to the kind of core sound that launched his career in the first place, which ironically, now that I say that, he did do that. But this is just another more kind of generic, boring rhythm project that landed in 2024. He even managed to take beloved producers like Infect and Samplifier and turn them into shells. This is a Bowtied 4. Then we got Nightmare with Unsound 2, a very serviceable EP and second installment of Unsound, which simultaneously is a huge improvement on the first. The tracks feel a bit more cohesive rather than a mixed bag of junk from the first installment, and while I appreciate the plethora of features on this thing, Nightmare's own sound is starting to get a little buried in all those features. I'll give this a Bowtied 6. Then we got Space Yeti with Traveler, a commendable EP with good production. Space Yeti just needs to find that sound that makes him unique. I don't quite think he's landed that yet, but I know more will come soon. This would give a Bowtied 6. Then we got 21 Pilots with Clancy. A brand new sound from 21 Pilots was definitely a surprise and a welcome one. I don't think this is their greatest work, but very much a consistent and strong record. I just wish there were a couple bigger tunes and bigger moments on this record. I'll give it a Bowtied 7. Then we've got Veer with Paranoia. Pretty disappointed by this latest EP. I just didn't find anything to really hold on to. But I do recognize that Veer goes absolutely insane on this EP. I think it's just a different type of insane for me that I don't really enjoy a whole ton. I'll give this a Bowtied 5. Then we got No Mana with I Contain Flashing Images. In an era where Electro House is found few and far between, No Mana brings forth his sophomore record brimming with top-tier Electro House sound design and production. Melding together the kind of classic styles of Deadmau5 with a fresh, energetic twist of his own, I Contain Flashing Images is potentially one of the best Electro records this side of the 2020s, maybe even in beyond and further back, but the first half of this album is filled with crushing, booming, and hard-driven electro house, only for the back end to have a more straightforward, progressive tinge to it. A little something for everyone. I'll give this a Bowtied 8. Then we got Death Pact from Darkness. Yet another faceless, dark, moody dubstep producer who wants you to buy into the project based off of the description alone. The first half of this record had fairly good, dense tracks, but the back half of the record was just a wavering, jumbled mess of random ideas and sounds with no cohesion. Cut a couple of tracks and expand some ideas, and you might actually have a great record on your hands here. But otherwise, I'm going to give this a Bowtied 5. Then we got A Craze with Flavors. For a mixture of abrasive dubstep and crushing rhythm, I found this EP to be quite pleasing. Definitely one of my favorite producers in the expanded rhythm space right now. I will give this a Bowtied 6 though. Then we got Elio with Something in the Air. Elio has definitely chosen to take the easy path with her debut record by making a predominantly pop record. I personally really vibed with her more indie sounds, but I understand that this is a more feasible career path for her, but I just didn't find many of these tracks to be overly unique. I'll give this a Bowtied 6. Then we got Odessa with the Last Goodbye Tour Live. Probably the greatest live EDM record since Daft Punk's Alive 2007. I do wish there were some more mashups and alternative mixes, as a majority of the tracks, at least their lead majority, are played straightforwardly. Still a surreal project with ridiculous songwriting, and I'll give this a Bowtied 8. Then we got Slumberjack with Generations. An odd choice of stylistic direction for Slumberjack to take, foregoing their signature tribal hybrid trap and opting for a more generic club-focused garage slash tech house EP. I just really struggle with why they would choose to go away with a sound that they have honed in for so many years for derivative house. But I'll give this a Bowtied 6. And finally, we've got Slow Palace with Gemini. As a collective whole, I thought the tone and style of this record was pretty nice. Individually, though, each track was a little lackluster and a touch too slow. I'll give this a Bowtied 6. But let me know what you guys think of any of these albums, EPs, mixtapes from May of this year that I mentioned here. What did you think of them? Did you love them? Did you not? I'd love to hear in the comment section below. But other than that, I'm Dakota from Bowtied Media, and I'll see you guys in another video.